Hey guys, what's up? So I spent 50 bucks on a whiteboard and some markers. So I was watching this other guy's YouTube channel, and it seems a really effective way to kind of spread, you know, truth versus just talking about it or clicking on a keyboard. Anyway, I'm working on the setup. I'm sorry about this glare in the middle. I just bootleg this stuff, um, my little rig right here. But anyway, you can see we're going to start with what the Bible came from and how old each text is. So let's start around 400 BC. We get the first known manuscripts called the Samaritan Bible, which is only the first 5 books of Moses, called the Torah, the Pentateuch. So that is the oldest source of the first 5 books of Moses that we have. If we go forward a couple hundred years, around 200 BC, that's when the Septuagint was issued by the King Ptolemy II, because he was trying to build the Alexandrian library. And so he asked 72 scholars, each of the 12 tribes of Israel, to come and translate it into the modern day verbiage at the time, which was Koine Greek. Okay, a lot of people didn't speak Hebrew, especially a lot of the Jews in the Western world at that time. They no longer passed down the Hebrew language like they knew the Greek. So the king said, he wanted a Greek translation so everyone could read it. So this was literally the first 5 books of Moses started until a little bit after 100 AD. Then the Old Testament was completed. However, Jesus was obviously in the middle of that and died and resurrected in the year AD 33. So Jesus and his apostles were using the Septuagint for their Old Testament, because before 400 BC we have no manuscripts in Hebrew of the original Old Testament. And a lot of people don't know that, and I didn't know that till a week ago. This Masoretic Text here all the way at 900 AD, that's the Hebrew Bible that we are reading today, okay? And the Jews specifically made the Masoretic Text so they could discredit a lot of the Jesus prophecies, like Isaiah 7:14, and this says a young woman will give birth to a person named Emmanuel. Whereas the Septuagint, almost 1,000 years earlier, it says it's a virgin in the correct text. So it is a conspiracy once again. I hate to say it, but the Jews are responsible for lying in their own Bible. So that's like literally the cardinal sin. And if you're doing it to change prophecies that God made, that kind of implies you're not really on God's side. You're on tradition's side, and whatever makes your culture look good. Okay, so what the Greek text we're now using is the Textus Receptus, which is what the KJV uses, even though it veers sometimes because of political reasons. That's why you should never trust any English Bible. And then the Westcott and Hort text, which was actually I think about 25 years, it's dated 25 years sooner than the Textus Receptus. But here's the thing, because the Textus Receptus was being used so often, it wore out a lot easier than this text that people weren't using as much. So they're like, well, if that's the official text, why isn't there older copies? Because it was used so much, and because people kept sharing it, it wore out sooner than this Westcott and Hort text, okay? And as we all know, the Westcott and Hort takes away so many verses that have to do with doctrine. They're not just little tidbits here and there. It's like a whole plethora of different things that they took out. So in the same way, the Westcott and Hort texts take out a lot of the prophecies. The Masoretic text of the Hebrew Old Testament takes away a lot of the prophecies. So my point with this video is to show the most reliable text is the Septuagint if you want to read the Old Testament, even if it's Greek. Okay, Greek is much easier to learn than Hebrew. You know that whole saying, well, it's Greek to me? That's a conspiracy. Greek is one of the easiest languages to read. I'm not saying talk and speak, but to read. There's only about 5 letters that differ from the English alphabet. Whereas Hebrew, you got to really take your time and study that stuff. But I grew up Jewish, luckily. Had a bar mitzvah in 2000. Did a whole 3-hour service in Hebrew. I wasn't just a Reformed or conservative. It was an Orthodox synagogue. Okay, so I even wore a yarmulke for almost a year before my bar mitzvah, because I was really into this. I knew there was some truth behind it, but of course I didn't know about the real New Testament until later. anyway, I just wanted y'all to kind of visualize the timeline that we're looking at here. Okay? Samaritan Bible, Septuagint Old Testament, then Jesus, then these Greek texts for the New Testament started popping up, even though Jesus, all the ante-Nicene fathers, by the way. Let's add that real quick. Let's go. Anti doesn't mean anti, it means before. So before the Nicene Council, before Christmas was made into Jesus' birthday, all that paganism, the ante-Nicene fathers were quoting the Septuagint text much more than they were quoting the later on Masoretic Text, which happens to leave all these things out. Because you got people like Polycarp and Irenaeus, who literally knew John and Peter, the actual apostles that Jesus knew. They're quoting the Septuagint, okay? And they're also quoting the Textus Receptus more than these Westcott and Hort texts, okay? So there's a big conspiracy going on, y'all. And the irony is that God says you have to study to show thyself approved unto God. And most of these Christians are taught not to think. Churches don't want you to think because you'll Google Christmas is pagan and find out about it. The churches are not on your side. I don't feel sorry for any of these priests or preachers right now, but I do feel sorry for the congregations and the sheep who are being led astray because they can't Google anything, okay? It's the age of information. And it really kind of makes you wonder how much faith these Christians really have if they're too scared to Google their own religion. And I know there's all this anti-Jesus stuff nowadays because it's the end times, but if you search, you will find that there is something to this. And it's not just me wishing that there's a God and I'll go to heaven and there's nothing in the afterlife. No, I'm positive there's an afterlife. So now the question is how to explain it, and this is the best way to start, is to see the timeline, to know the correct text to read, and then we can move forward. So if you're reading the Old Testament, you need to get the Septuagint, not just the Hebrew. And if you're reading the New Testament, it needs to be the Textus Receptus, not the Westcott and Hort, which is the NIV Bibles and all this other garbage. I used to think this was going to be the end-all Bible that I needed. Interlinear Bible with Hebrew, Greek, and English by Green. Okay, however, it's only got the Masoretic Text, the Hebrews, the ones the Jews corrupted. Even though there's all the gematria and all those codes and stuff, it is still not the most accurate text, so I'm waiting for the Septuagint. Then, of course, the New Testament is in Greek and English. Excuse me. Anyway, that's my whiteboard. I'm going to probably think of some other stuff that requires writing down or showing you in this fashion. I'll try and get rid of that glare sooner or later, but we'll see what happens. Take it easy, y'all.